the world fought against the Kaiser and his troops, a war to end war. Somewhere among those troops was an obscure lance corporal, Adolf Hitler, inconspicuous, avoiding the danger of the trenches, serving as a runner for the German staff. November the 11th, 1918, the armistice is signed. While the world rejoices, Hitler lies in hospital, staggered by the news of defeat. Around him already is the murmur of revolution. It gathers pace. The Kaiser flees to Holland. The German army is disbanded, and from the rabble of unemployed soldiers is formed the Reichswehr, an armed political body that Hitler joins.
In 1919, the politicians of the world gather at the old Palace of Versailles to plan for peace. The treaty they sign is designed to give peace to Europe, freedom to minorities, and they hope ultimate prosperity to the German masses. They have never heard of the Austrian who has risen from the doss houses of Vienna, from painting and selling postcards to the proud position of a spy for the Reichswehr.
In Düsseldorf, industrial troubles break out. The big industrialists, men like Krupp, Thyssen, and Kierdorf, plunge the people into poverty. Hitler sees his opportunity. He deserts the Reichswehr and forms a new party, the Nazis.
With peaceful displays in Berlin, official Germany celebrates the formation of the Republic under President Hindenburg. Meanwhile, Hitler is attracting support to his Nazi party by pretending to adopt socialism. As the crisis deepens, representatives from all the provinces attend a congress and pledge themselves to pull together. Meanwhile, Hitler tries his Munich beer cellar putsch. When that fails, he realizes he cannot make headway without powerful support, so he reverses his policy, forgets his pretense to socialism, and sells himself to the big industrialists, the very men who are throttling the German people.
So, with the help of its powerful backers, when the new Reichstag is opened, the Nazis have secured seats. The first brown shirts, with their swastika armbands, stride arrogantly into the meeting. Hitler is growing in power as the big industrialists fall for his argument that their choice is between himself and communism, between the swaggering leadership of Goering or the revolution. Serious rioting breaks out. The Nazis are deliberately causing trouble to force the people of Germany to believe that there is a threat of violent communism in their midst, that only by supporting the Nazis can they avoid another revolution. The situation gets worse. 6 million unemployed are starving.
At Lausanne, the Allies discuss the situation in Germany. They fear a complete breakdown, civil war, which will wreck the peace of Europe. The Allies fail to see that all their loans to Germany are being seized by Hitler and his backers. The Allies agree to cancel all reparations. It is too late. In Germany, the Reichswehr is still loyal to Hindenburg. Its display of strength scares Hitler. Again, he reverses his policy. He pretends to throw in his lot with the communists and deliberately provokes the great transport strike. His underhand tricks work. At last, the army offers him its support.
In Geneva, the Allies make yet another effort to save Germany. The Disarmament Commission agrees to terms which put Germany on an equal footing with the rest of Europe. With every country disarmed, surely it will be possible to keep peace.
But Hitler now has the army behind him. As the leader of the strongest party, he is called to Berlin by Hindenburg and asked to take office as Chancellor. But he isn't satisfied. He wants absolute power. He demands an election.
On the eve of the election, the Reichstag building goes up in flames. Hitler and his Nazis scream it is a communist plot. They rig up a fake trial. They find a half-crazy Dutch boy who is persuaded or tortured into confessing. Months later, the world is to learn that the Nazis themselves started the fire. But at the time of the election, the German people do not know this. They believe in the trial and all that the Nazis tell them, that it is part of a communist plan for a bloody revolution in Germany. In a state of panic, the people vote for the Nazis. Little do they know what horror they are bringing upon themselves and upon the world. The Curse of the Swastika.
The Nazis stage great parades to celebrate their overwhelming victory in the election. Thus, Hitler has at last succeeded in lying and tricking his way into power, making and breaking promises to everyone in turn, showing himself as a man without a shred of honor, decency, or principle.
In Germany there begins the rule by force, the degradation of a nation, the loss of liberty and hope.
Even the old German imperial flag is condemned. In future, the Nazi emblem shall fly alongside the old flag. Germany comes completely under the curse of the swastika.
In Berlin's Opera House on the 23rd of March, the Reichstag meets. While Hitler poses as a man of peace, laying a wreath in memory of the men who died to put him in power, Nazi stormtroops force the Reichstag to pass a bill giving Hitler complete dictatorial powers.
Britain still thinks of peace. On the 7th of June, the Four-Power Pact is signed. Meanwhile, in Germany, Hitler talks of the sacredness of treaties, swears that neither France nor Poland has anything to fear from him, that all he wants is peace.
Yet the wheels of the German armament factories have already begun to turn. Openly they talk of peace. Secretly they build guns. On the 14th of October 1933, Germany leaves the League of Nations and the Disarmament Conference. Hitler claims that both have failed.
In Poland, Marshal Pilsudski is the strong man reviewing his troops. With him, Hitler signs a treaty as a gesture of good faith. All differences between Germany and Poland to be settled by peaceful negotiation. Germany has no territorial claims in Europe.
But almost at once, Hitler turns greedy eyes towards Austria. He embarks on a deliberate policy of provoking trouble there. While the Austrian army parades in Vienna, a voice on the German radio urges the troops to mutiny, trying to provoke anti-communist civil war in Austria. The voice on the German radio is that of Halbricht, one of Hitler's lieutenants. Immediately, Britain, France, and Italy join in warning Hitler.
He is scared by the joint action against him. He flies to Venice to see Mussolini. By the side of the brilliantly uniformed Duce, Hitler cuts an almost insignificant figure as they ride together down the Grand Canal. Mussolini shows his guests the beauties of Venice while he talks of Italy's power. Hitler realizes that he must respect Austria and call off the Nazi terror. Hitler must have been so busy making promises he can hardly have noticed the beauties of Venice. Not for one moment does he intend to keep his promises.
But for the time being, affairs at home distract Hitler's attention from Austria. It is obvious that Hindenburg is a sick man. The Nazi party leaders meet and elect his successor, Hitler. He prepares the way by getting rid of possible enemies in the famous blood purge of June 1934. Hundreds are murdered, including many of those who were closest to Hitler in the early days of the movement. Meanwhile, in Vienna, the Chancellery is stormed by Austrian Nazis.
Immediately, Italy moves up troops to the Austrian frontier, giving notice that she intends to keep her word guaranteeing Austrian independence. Hitler is caught unawares, so he deserts the Austrian Nazis.
Dollfuss, the Chancellor of Austria, is dead, murdered in his own palace by the Nazis. As his murderers watched him bleed to death, they refused his dying request for a priest to be called to administer the last sacrament.
And Hindenburg is dead too, on the 2nd of August 1934. There is no need for an election to his successor, for the Nazi cabinet has already chosen Hitler. In his first speech as Vice President, he makes a mockery of the old president's funeral.
Hitler is now an all-powerful dictator. At the cadet school at Lichterfelde, the army now swears allegiance to him, to the man who has achieved power by lies, trickery, and the murder of hundreds, including his closest friends. That man the German army now swears to serve.
Adolf Hitler!
The swastika now hangs like a horrible and barbaric curse over Germany. It is the symbol of ruthless murders, of the persecution of the Jews, of every form of gangsterdom and racketeering, of the destruction of anything that stands in Hitler's way. Everyone in Germany is under the curse, from child to old man. Workers are hammered into a dumb acceptance of it by the brutalities of the Gestapo and the concentration camps. A few escape as homeless refugees.
Einstein, the greatest scientist of this age, is driven out, penniless, for the crime of being a Jew.
The Jews are being sacrificed by Hitler to still unrest among the people. Once the workers were told that the Nazis stood for them and socialism. Now they're getting restless and discontented under broken promises. The Nazis have a new tale, that the Jews are the capitalists to be wiped out. At the same time, the big industrialists are being told another story, that the Jews are the agitators and middlemen who grab all the profits.
The people of Germany are still free to vote. They may choose between Hitler and the concentration camp. Elections are a mockery under the supervision of Gestapo agents.
By force and terrorism, Hitler has obtained some semblance of unity in Germany. Now he looks beyond his boundaries. He raises the question of the Tsar, which is still under the mandate of the League of Nations. He claims that it must return to Germany.
Wir wollen mit niemandem handeln in der Welt. Sie müssen wissen, dass dieses Volk ein unzertrennlicher Block geworden ist, der den Frieden will.
Under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the people of the Saar are to vote in January 1935 either to return to Germany or to remain under the League. Italian, British, Dutch, and Swedish troops are sent into the Saar to keep order and prevent anything like a nasty putsch which would almost certainly provoke France into warlike action.
In Britain, some people hope that the Tsar will vote for a return to Germany and against the League.
Others believe that if the vote goes against Hitler, he will try to seize the Tsar by force and throw the whole of Europe into a state of war.
But they vote for Hitler, all right, under the gentle persuasion of secret Nazi agents, and peace is saved
at a price. The weakening of the League. Immediately, Hitler tells the diplomats that he has no further territorial claim.
At the same time, he announces that Germany is building up an air force. He even makes a futile attempt to justify this by saying that he cannot give mutual assistance under the Locarno Pact without planes.
Flanders, France, is alarmed by Hitler's action. France has been disarming and now finds herself in an inferior position to Germany. Flanders announces immediate steps to increase France's military strength.
The arms race is on. War clouds gather again over Europe. Sir John Simon and Sir Eric Pitt fly to Berlin to try to find a peaceful solution.
But they are cold-shouldered by Hitler, who is at Berchtesgaden. He refuses to see them, saying he has a bad cold.
2 days later, Hitler returns to Berlin to announce that he has a plan to save the peace of Europe. He has no cold, but he has a peace plan. Conscription for Germany.
At the same time, he boasts that Germany has secretly been building submarines. He even pretends that this declaration shows his good faith. Further to show his good faith, he signs in June 1935 the London Naval Agreement. He agrees to limit Germany's battleships to 35% of Britain's tonnage, but secretly he goes on building above this figure. At the same time, he sneeringly offers to rejoin the League at a price, the return of Germany's lost colonies.
Simultaneously, he makes other preparations. Great new motor roads are opened all over Germany. He boasts at this time that he is planning for peace. But the roads don't run to places where the people would want to go, even if they had cars to drive along them. They are military roads leading to possible battlefields.
By March 1936, he has conveniently forgotten all he ever said about having no territorial claims. He imagines that the war between Italy and Abyssinia and the problems of sanctions have caused a rift between Britain and her ally France.
This, he thinks, is his opportunity. Still screaming that all he wants is peace,
he seeks to widen the imaginary rift by offering a 25-year peace pact to France. A clever plan to separate her from Britain, but it fails. France rejects the offer.
Then Hitler shows himself in his true colors. He marches his troops into the Rhineland in defiance of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. He gambles on the chance that France and Britain really do want peace, and don't just talk about it.
The gamble succeeds, but he still fails to separate Britain and France. But when he triumphantly visits the factory towns of the Rhineland,
he is bold enough to hurl defiance at everyone. In one breath, he shouts that all he wants for Germany is peace. In the next, he screams hysterically that there will never be peace in Europe until Germany's colonies are returned.
Unterstelle ich mich nicht. Sie kann mich nicht richten. Ziel, unterwerfe mich. Richte du mich. Gib du ein Bekenntnis ab, ob du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst. Ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt eine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
The armament factories are speeded up, pouring out guns and yet more guns.
The conscript army grows larger and larger. On Hitler's 47th birthday, parades in Berlin are staged deliberately to show Britain Germany's new strength.
But he is not ready to use it yet. Affairs in Spain provide him with a good opportunity to strike indirectly at Britain's empire. He agrees to a policy of non-intervention.
But he sends guns and troops, tanks and planes to bomb open towns, murder women and children, to plunge Spain into all the horrors of 20th century warfare. These are Hitler's weapons. In China, too, Hitler deliberately provokes the war. He urges Japan to fight. At the same time, he sells arms to the Chinese. Hitler hopes that the war, with all its horrors, will continue as long as possible, for the double purpose of making money for Germany and harassing Britain's interests in the Far East. This is Hitlerism, and the curse of the swastika spreads its evil shadow.
At Berchtesgaden to see Hitler is Count Ciano of Italy. Two countries have been plunged into war, and now Germany's Führer begins to think again about Austria. He is still faced by Italian objection, so he asks Count Ciano what Italy would do if Germany interfered with Austria's independence. Evidently the time is not yet ripe. Hitler doesn't act, but he goes on preparing.
Hitler sent his agents to Palestine, where the Jewish refugees are trying to build a new and more peaceful life, trying to forget the horrors of the Gestapo from which they have fled.
But the Gestapo follows them. The Nazis shatter their peace by stirring up rioting between Arabs and Jews. Why? Just another inhuman way of striking at Britain's vital trade, which, if broken, would make her helpless and unable to undertake a war. Spain at one end of the Mediterranean, Palestine at the other.
And China in the Far East. Hitler does not count the cost in suffering. The lives of innocent men, women, and children mean nothing to him. He boasts openly that anything or anybody who stands in his way, or in the way of his crazy dream of power, must be sacrificed.
In September 1937, Mussolini pays a state visit to Berlin. Perhaps he and Hitler discuss Austria. The world is not told what is said or decided. But very soon, Chancellor Schuschnigg of Austria is told by Hitler that something must be done about the Austrian problem. The Führer says he will be magnanimous. He will agree to an amicable settlement.
But his speech to the Reichstag in the Berlin Opera House hardly sounds like that of a man prepared for a peaceful settlement. He's a bad liar, but liars should have good memories. Only a few weeks before, he was swearing by all he held sacred that he had no claims against Austria. Now he shouts and screams that the very existence of an independent Austria is a threat to Germany which can no longer be tolerated.
Wie vor jeder feigen Zeichen, vor keiner Gewalt, vor keiner Gefahr.
But Schuschnigg is confident. He has a small, well-equipped army and a guarantee from Italy. His reply to Hitler is to ask the people of Austria themselves to vote within 2 days. Such short notice will prevent interference by Germany's propaganda machine. As Hitler realizes the meaning of Schuschnigg's plan, the tide of war is rising. Britain works for peace. Lord Halifax and Sir Neville Henderson are in Germany, ostensibly on holiday as guests of Goering, but in reality they are trying to stem the rising flood in vain.
On the eve of crisis, Vienna dances, just as over 100 years before Brussels danced on the eve of Waterloo. Hitler sends Schuschnigg an ultimatum. He says his patience is exhausted. The plebiscite must be postponed or else he will march into Austria. So Austria falls to the Nazi wolves. Deserted and powerless, a nation yields, a people awaits its fate. Schuschnigg is imprisoned. Today he is still a prisoner in Vienna, broken by nearly 2 years of mental and physical torture. So on the 12th of March 1938, Austria comes under the curse.
Sie entspricht dem Gebot, das einst die deutschen Siedler aus allen Gauen des Altreichs hierher gerufen hat. Die älteste Ostmark des deutschen Volkes soll von jetzt ab das jüngste Ballern der deutschen Nation und damit des deutschen Reichs sein. Führer und Kanzler der deutschen Nation und des Reichs, wähle ich vor der deutschen Geschichte nunmehr den Eintritt meiner Heimat in das Deutsche Reich.
The people of Vienna cheer the announcement that Austria always was German and is now returning to the Greater Reich. What else can they do?
When overhead, hundreds of German bombers remind them that they must accept their fate. Under the threat of force, brutality and degradation are now the lot of the Austrian people.
The Gestapo begins its reign of spying, of ruthless murder and torture.
The lovely towns of the Austrians, where an industrious people was trying to live in peace, trying to build a new life, out of the shattered remnants of the last war, these lovely towns are now the scenes of arrogantly triumphant tours by Hitler, who claims a bloodless victory. But Austria pays in death before the firing squad, in the sorrows of women and the fears of children.
April 1938. Hitler celebrates his birthday with yet another display of the mailed fist and of Germany's preparedness for war. After the seizure of Austria, he said he had no further territorial claims. Now he is beginning to hurl abuse at Czechoslovakia. He claims that the Sudeten Germans are being persecuted and prepares to make another bloodless conquest with a threat of force.
At the beginning of May, Hitler leaves Berlin to pay another visit to Italy.
The world remembers the last meeting between Hitler and Mussolini and now waits, wondering what this one portends.
Hitler insists it is a visit of peace. He makes a great display of laying a wreath on the Italian War Memorial. But in his hypocritical mind, he is already planning the fate of Czechoslovakia, making a mockery of this ceremony.
Because he means war when he speaks of peace, he rushes ahead the building of the Siegfried Line. As usual, he has an excuse. He suggests that the building of these fortifications along the Rhine proves that he has no further claims in Europe, that they fix Germany's frontiers forever. In fact, he is encircling France. His agreement with Italy, his foothold in Spain, and now the Siegfried Line to complete the plan to prevent France giving help to Czechoslovakia when he is ready to strike.
France replies by manning her Maginot Line. She has learnt her lesson from the fate of Austria, not to trust in Hitler's word. She puts her faith in right and keeps her powder dry, hoping for peace but ready for war behind the mightiest system of fortifications in the history of the world. Her underground fortresses are incomparably stronger than those of Germany. Here 1 million men live underground and keep watch.
The crisis rises rapidly to a head with the Nuremberg Congress of September. Officially a peaceful display, it hardly looks and sounds peaceful.
The entire German army is mobilized within striking distance of Czechoslovakia. Heil, my soldiers, says Hitler, building himself up into a sort of war god of the German people. He walks alone down an avenue of steel helmets in a mad pagan ritual, leading Germany in the worship of brute force.
Meanwhile, under Hitler's cruel headline, the Nazis have successfully caused disorder in the Sudetenland by murdering innocent Czechs, by rioting and clashes with the police.
Hitler says his patience is exhausted. The peace of Europe hangs on a very slender thread.
Chamberlain takes the dramatic step of flying to Germany in a last-minute effort to save the world from catastrophe.
At Berchtesgaden, he tries to find a peaceful way out of the crisis which Hitler's megalomania has precipitated. But Hitler does not want a peaceful settlement. His agents continue their work. Incidents occur when German troops violate the frontiers. Lyingly, he claims it is the Czechs who violate the frontiers.
Once again, Chamberlain prepares to fly to Germany.
European peace is what I am aiming at, and I hope that this journey may open the way to get it.
At Godesberg, Hitler screams and rages like the madman he is. He doesn't want to listen to reason. He must have the Sudetenland now. And the world's headlines shout their fear of the tragedy that now seems inevitable.
Chamberlain returns to London, and the situation looks black indeed.
Loyal Czechs flee from the Sudetenland before the threatened invasion.
French troops are called up.
Chamberlain speaks frankly to the people of Britain.
How horrible, fantastic, incredible it is that we should be digging trenches and trying on gas masks here because of a quarrel in a faraway country between people of whom we know nothing. Meanwhile, there are certain things that we can and should do at home. Volunteers are still wanted for air raid precautions, for fire brigades and police services, and for the territorial units. And I ask you to offer your services, if you have not already done so, to the local authorities, who will tell you if you are wanted and in what capacity. Don't be alarmed if you hear of men being called up to man anti-aircraft defenses or ships. However much we may sympathize with a small nation confronted by a big and powerful neighbor, we cannot, in all circumstances, undertake to involve the whole British Empire in war simply on her account. But if I were convinced that any nation had made up its mind to dominate the world by fear of its force, I should feel that it must be resisted. For the present, I ask you to wait as calmly as you can for the events of the next few days. As long as war has not begun, there is always hope that it may be prevented. And you know that I am going to work for peace till the last moment.
The British Navy and the reserve fleets are mobilized.
President Roosevelt expresses the feelings of the world in a humane appeal for peace and sanity.
Then, when Chamberlain faces Parliament to tell them that war cannot be avoided with honor, comes the invitation to Munich.
And Chamberlain, Daladier, Mussolini, and Hitler signed the agreement. There were some at the time who complained bitterly that Czechoslovakia was deserted by her allies, that Britain and France should have stood by her. Now, in the light of subsequent events, they have surely changed their minds. They will know now that Britain was not then equipped and ready for war. The time for action had not yet come.
So the Sudetenland is absorbed by Germany, and the peace of Europe is saved again. And again a price is paid for it.
Preparations are made for Hitler's arrival in the Sudeten towns of Asch and Agar. Thousands of Nazi troops are sent in ahead to organize enthusiasm among the people and to make sure that they don't show their real feelings with a boo or a bomb.
Surrounded by hundreds of soldiers and stormtroopers, he crosses the frontier. When once again he says he has no more territorial claims, the world merely wonders where he will strike next.
The answer isn't long in coming. Goering turns the Nazi machine against Poland. The same old routine of propaganda and lies. Goering quotes his Führer.
The Poles are stirring up anti-Nazi feeling in Danzig. Little Poland is threatening the peace of Germany.
Chamberlain explains Britain's view to the foreign press.
While I hope that we shall always be ready to discuss in a reasonable spirit any grievances or any injustices which may be alleged to exist, it is to reason that we are prepared to listen and not to force.
Just before the storm breaks, Hitler poses as a man of peace at Goering's birthday party with Goering's wife and baby. On the 30th of January, Hitler says,
"Only the warmongers think there will be war. I think there will be a long period of peace."
On the 15th of March, Germany strikes, not at Poland, but at the remainder of Czechoslovakia.
Troops march in without warning. They take possession of Prague, the capital, and all the principal cities and strategic points.
Hitler drives into Prague in a bulletproof car, sitting down behind bulletproof screens, driving quickly through the streets.
He makes only a brief appearance at a high window standing well back. This time he is not so sure of the temper of the people.
Soon he is back in Berlin to make another speech with the inevitable no more claims in Europe theme. He says,
"We are rearming, but do not dream of attacking other nations, provided they leave us alone."
and all Germany rejoices at this latest assurance by the self-styled man of peace.
The 21st of March, 1939, finds Hitler on the battleship Deutschland on his way to East Prussia.
He drives to Memel, and Memel is annexed by the Nazis. A few days later, in reply to President Roosevelt, Hitler says,
Mr. Roosevelt believes that once more the tide of events is bringing the threat of arms. So far as Germany is concerned, I know nothing of this kind of threat to other nations.
Now it is obvious the clash must come. France calls up her reserve.
Guarantees are given to Poland, Greece, and Romania.
The French army and air force move to battle stations.
The only questions are how, when, and where will the war break out?
Germany hurries forward her preparations.
Mock air raids are staged over Berlin for ARP practice with gruesome realism.
Paris, too, practices the blackout against air raids.
In Danzig, the Nazis force the crisis on.
Nazi troops practically take possession of the Free City.
The German battleship, the Schleswig-Holstein, goes to Danzig to reinforce the Nazis there.
Danzigers sympathetic to the Nazis are recruited and armed.
In August comes the biggest shock of all.
Ribbentrop goes to Moscow to discuss a pact with Russia.
After years of hurling all kinds of abuse at Russia, of screaming about her in the language of the gutter, Hitler now makes a non-aggression pact with Stalin.
Now war becomes almost inevitable.
Lord Halifax speaks for Britain.
The British people have always felt bound to oppose attempts by one power to dominate Europe at the expense of others. And now that the possibility of conflict again exists, the government have taken steps to declare their attitude not only to the world, but in a special message to Herr Hitler.
After this, Germany cannot, as she did in 1914, complain that Britain did not make her position clear, and then try to lay the blame of war on her.
But Hitler goes on his mad way. Nazi troops violate the Polish frontier time and time again. Poland shows amazing restraint in not launching hostilities in the face of continuous German provocation.
Sir Neville Henderson flies to Berlin in a last effort to stop the madman of Europe.
President Roosevelt puts America's official view, and in unmistakable words shows where her sympathies really lie.
This nation will remain a neutral nation, but I cannot ask that every American remain neutral in thought as well. Even a neutral has a right to take account of facts. Even a neutral cannot be asked to close his mind or to close his conscience.
So the die is cast. The swastika spreads its curse over Europe, and Hitler has forced the world into a new war.
Silently, the battle fleets of Britain move out to their stations at the far corners of the earth. The lean, grim fighting ships speed across the ocean on their job of protecting the seaborne trade of the Allies and crushing the enemy wherever they may find him.
At home, thousands of children are evacuated from the war dangers of the cities. Overnight, the family life of the nation is changed.
Britain is ready to meet the threat of fury from the air, the menace from the sky that Hitler said he would send from the land of the swastika.
But the curse first strikes at sea. Women and children and neutral Americans are rescued from the Athenia, the first unarmed passenger liner to be sunk without warning by Hitler.
In France, the great Maginot Line pulsates to life as 6 million Frenchmen stand ready. And behind the fortresses of concrete and steel, the new British Army smoothly and secretly takes over its position. After 20 years, the Tommies are back in France. Shields are leveled into aerodromes for our warplanes, and the advanced units of the British Air Forces are ready for action. And against Germany's Siegfried Line, the heavy artillery of France booms its challenge.
From all over the empire comes the answer to the call. The Canadians arrive in Britain.
While in Australia, Sydney watches the diggers march again before they leave for Europe.
But the advance guard of the Australian Air Force is already here in Britain.
Men from India are landed in France on their way to the Western Front. And from France's own colonies, her troops join in the fight for freedom.
As the conflict starts, Britain is ready to revive the vast convoy system of the last war. Ships of every nation ply the sea lanes of the world on their lawful occasions under the protection of the warships of Britain and France.
In the air, around our shores and far out over the sea, the Coastal Command of the Royal Air Force keeps watch by day and night to protect our shipping and drive off the murderous U-boats and Nazi planes.
Thousands of British fishermen are enrolled in the mine-sweeping flotillas. Theirs is a deadly, ceaseless, relentless war on the undersea and air mine layers. Magnetic and drifting mines laid contrary to all international law claim their victims from time to time. But the seaborne trade of Britain goes on uninterrupted.
And the once proud planes of the German Air Force. The wreckage along our coast is witness of the speed and deadly firepower of our Hurricanes and Spitfires. And many another German bomber has been driven down into the sea.
6,000 miles from home in the South Atlantic, the first great sea battle of the war turns into a major German tragedy.
The hunted and battered Graf Spee scuttles herself after the superb attack by Britain's cruisers Ajax, Exeter, and Achilles. But even here the curse of Hitler's swastika falls. For after he had been ordered directly by Hitler to scuttle his ship, the Graf Spee's commander, Captain Langsdorff, commits suicide.
So the German defeat of the River Plate is almost complete.
But not quite. The end of the story is written on the jagged Norwegian coast, where the Nazi prison ship, the Altmark, is intercepted by the Royal Navy, and the British prisoners taken by the Graf Spee are released.
As HMS Cossack glides into a Scottish port, she brings 300 officers and men saved from a Nazi concentration camp. Do you wonder that they're happy and relieved to have been snatched back from under the shadow of the swastika?
And when at last the Ajax and Exeter are home, London pays a magnificent tribute to the men who by almost unbelievable heroism and daring achieved such a superb victory over the pride of the German Navy. The King, accompanied by the First Lord, joined the people in celebration. As Her Majesty the Queen watches from a balcony, the 760 officers and men form a hollow square facing the Admiralty in London. The full story of their magnificent heroism has now been told, the heroism which has earned them their decoration. Men of the Royal Navy, we are proud of you. In you the spirit of Nelson still lives. And when the men are received by London's Lord Mayor, the seal is set in the historic Guildhall on an outstanding day in British history. Mr. Churchill.
The brilliant sea fight which Admiral Harwood conceived, and which those who are here executed takes its place in our naval annals, and I may add that in a dark, cold winter it warmed the cockles of the British heart. Immortal signal of 135 years ago, England expects that every man will do his duty. There may now be added last week's not less proud reply, the Navy is here.
Captain Woodhouse of the Ajax.
We feel now that our encounter with the Graf Spee early in the morning on a nice fine day and with plenty of sea room has made us the envy of the rest of the Navy.
And Captain Bell of the Exeter.
Really, but that which every officer and man is so accustomed to do that it is really second nature to him. We carried out our orders to the best of our ability.
So here is Britain's answer to the Curse of the Swastika: to fight on with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our might, until we have helped to build a new world where peace and freedom shall reign for all time.